a privilege of walking around in the world being perceived as white, even if you don't perceive yourself that way, in terms of how you're treated.
I was literally called a paki at school.
Okay.
How am I perceived as white?
Well, it depends on where you are in the world.
Right. So in my country, I was name called and discriminated against for being brown. So I have a privilege. You've decided by looking at me that I have privilege?
We all have privilege on this panel. Everyone does. Everyone carries bits of it, right? I'm just saying, and I'm not saying that...
Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope you are all having a good one. Today, I've got this recent debate from Norway. It was Konstantin Kisin versus two woke socialists, and the audience, as it was clear they were very left-wing. I genuinely wonder what planet some of these woke types are on sometimes, because it's most certainly not Earth. As you saw in the opening clip, his opponent tells him he has white privilege. He replies he was racially abused when he was younger. Maybe in parts of Eastern or Southern Europe, he may pass as a local who is considered white, but not in the UK. He will stand out a mile in Northern Europe, in places like England or Norway, as he looks much darker than the locals. To suggest he had white privilege growing up in England in the 1990s is absolutely laughable. Watching this debate, I realised these people are brainwashed. They reduce literally everything in the world down to racism and sexism. Anytime a white man succeeds anywhere in life, it must be because of his male white privilege. It's an incredibly racist argument. The woman on the panel is the epitome of woke insanity. She talked delusional nonsense all evening. But I was surprised to see that Yanis Varoufakis is almost as bad as her at times. Konstantin said we shouldn't discriminate in education based on gender and race, and Yanis replied this.
Look, as an educator, many a time in a class there would be young people who, because of their disadvantaged background, needed more of my attention. Okay? Because of their disadvantaged background, they didn't have the same tools that other kids did. Now, I gave them more attention, which meant, because it's a zero-sum game, there are a fixed number of hours every day, that attention, extra attention, I didn't give to other kids that were advantaged or coming from the advantage. To call this discrimination, because I didn't make my time available equally to everyone, is to miss out on the fact that in order to bring about meritocracy, in order to bring out the talents of the disadvantaged kids, and of course, disadvantage is highly correlated with gender, with races, race, with ethnic background. To call this discriminatory in the pursuit of meritocracy is essentially to fly in the face of the facts.
The two are not comparable. To suggest a teacher spending more time with an individual pupil in his class who is struggling is the same as someone getting a university place over someone else because of their race or gender is, well, frankly, preposterous. Here in England, normally we have classrooms based on ability, so you're in a class with people of similar ability. People may get teachers' help, but they still have to pass the exam themselves. This is different. It's saying everyone applies to the best colleges and universities, and you may have the same grades, but whether you get accepted or not is down to your skin colour or gender. Women are already doing way better than boys in education, and it was interesting that Yanis didn't mention class. African and Indian kids from well-educated, rich families are doing way better than poor white kids at school here in the UK. Look at all the people of colour who have made it right to the top here. They mostly come from stable families, often with successful parents who are diplomats, professors and doctors. Watching this debate, it's little wonder Konstantin Kisin puts his head in his hands at one point. Just watch this.
Okay, so we had this discussion, very briefly, we had this discussion over dinner last night about diversity and inclusion and all of these programs which are intended to bring people into the thing. And I say to all of that, the right objective, difficult as it is to achieve in any society, is that there should be zero discrimination against people. And what we have today in the modern West is a new framework of discrimination. We have decided that it is okay to discriminate against white people. It's okay to discriminate. Oh, you laugh. Well, let me give you some statistics. Fantastic, I enjoy that.
Well, before you give us some statistics.
No, let me give some statistics.
You can come back
If you are Jewish or Asian or white, it is much harder for you to get into an American university because all of those groups are widely discriminated against in that society.
That's simply untrue.
That is factually correct.
That is simply untrue.
For the same SAT score, you are much less likely to get in.
Go to Wall Street.
The BBC has whole realms of jobs that are not available to white people. There are internships that prohibit white people from applying. Now, I don't regard myself as white. I'm a first-generation Russian, Ukrainian, Greek, Jewish immigrant. I hate this stuff, and I hate it because it unfairly privileges people who do not deserve the privilege. What we should be doing is eliminating discrimination, not introducing new types of discrimination.
Cynthia.
I think when you're born on first base and everybody else is trying
I was
to
not
come
born
up
on
behind
first base.
you already are.
How?
As a man.
You're a
As a
man.
man compared
You're
to
a
half
white
of the
man.
population, you have advantages that are undeniable.
Really?
They are. And you know, you already are ahead of the curve in applications to things, in the way that resumes are reviewed. And so, you know, and you have a privilege of walking around in the world being perceived as white, even if you don't perceive yourself that way, in terms of how you're treated.
I was
by
literally called a
shopkeepers,
paki at school.
Okay.
How am I perceived as white?
Well, it depends on where you are in the world.
Right. So in my country, I was name-called and discriminated against for being brown. So I have a privilege. You've decided by looking at me that I have privilege?
We all have privilege on this panel. Everyone does. Everyone carries bits of it, right? I'm just saying, and I'm not saying that there aren't differences in admissions. I mean,
There are.
but those differences are also coming on the heels of widespread, well-acknowledged data. The SAT scores are also biased. That people live in, really different, racially segregated neighborhoods with different school experiences, where 15% of the kids in Washington, D.C. are unhoused, right, in the public school system.
So why don't we fix that instead
Exactly.
of... Well,
We can
I'm
agree
fully
on
in
that.
favor of that, of course. What we should be doing is giving people an equal opportunity to succeed. What we're now doing is not giving people an opportunity to succeed.
But giving
and
an
then
equal
saying,
opportunity.
oh, you're black, let's give you a leg up into university. That doesn't work.
It's not a leg up. It's an
It is a leg up.
acknowledgement that there are differences in the experiences of kids who grow up, let's say, in poverty. That from certain school districts, from certain. So I think that there's, yes, so invest the energy there rather than at the other.
Can I just create a little bit of space for Konstantin to set out what the consequences of this mind virus, well, actually the mind virus you applied to people thinking this, but the consequences of the discrimination that you see in
Well,
place?
it's the end of meritocracy. It's the end of meritocracy.
It
When
never
you pick...
started. Meritocracy never begun to end. There's never been
It's the-
meritocracy. There's
okay,
always
let me
been
rephrase for the pedants.
privilege.
Let me rephrase for the
Racist
pedants.
and
It's
sexist.
the end of the pursuit of meritocracy as the goal. I agree with Cynthia. The United States Constitution, as written in its
Positive
original
discrimination is an attempt to create meritocracy.
format, a failed attempt, an attempt that promotes people who are not qualified.
But not
Yes.
trying is even more
No,
of a failure.
I did not say we should not try. I repeat
Look,
for the third time.
can I come in
it's
as an
difficult to
advocate
talk
for
when you
a minute.
interrupt me every 3 words. I did not say we should not try. I think you heard me say twice now that we should be seeking to eliminate discrimination. I think I heard myself say that. So the problem with this agenda is that it ends the pursuit of meritocracy as the singular goal for which we should be striving, and instead reintroduces a new form of discrimination that advantages people not for their talents, not for their drive, not for their passion, but for the fact that they have a certain skin color, a certain set of genitals, or whatever else. It is completely antithetical to the goals of the West.
Right.
Spectacularly
Before
off
you
point.
come in, I just want to ask one question so that we can narrow it down. Do you accept that in some environments, because just the nature of people responding to people who look or act like them, you end up with these sort of fairly, and it could be entirely black, it could be entirely white, it could be entirely gay. Do you recognize that there is a need to almost kickstart the process so that you have a more diverse and fair group that's doing the picking? You don't even accept that?
Absolutely not. I don't think
Under no circumstances.
I don't think there is any need to kickstart things. What there is a need to do is to make sure that people are not discriminated against because of the color of their skin or their sex or their sexuality.
Okay.
That's the need.
And if it's an entirely let's use the historical example, well, it might be white male group, or it could be black women doing the employment, and there is a record that they tend to employ like them, you don't think that some external force shoving them in a different direction should be brought
This is where meritocracy comes in. I am an employer. I run a YouTube channel which employs 10 people. It would never in a million years occur to me to employ somebody because of the color of their skin or their sex, because I know that the only thing that matters is getting the very best person for that job. The very best person. And by the way, just so you know, we hired a woman to run the whole thing and she fired all the other women. So there you go.
Yanis.
I'd like to make a couple of points. One concerns this. Look, as an educator, many a time, in a class, there would be young people who, because of their disadvantaged background, needed more of my attention. Okay? Because of their disadvantaged background, they didn't have the same tools that other kids did. Now, I gave them more attention, which meant, because it's a zero-sum game, there are a fixed number of hours every day, that attention, extra attention, I didn't give to other kids that were advantaged or coming from the advantage. To call this discrimination, because I didn't make my time available equally to everyone, is to miss out on the fact that in order to bring about meritocracy, in order to bring out the talents of the disadvantaged kids, and of course, disadvantage is highly correlated with gender, with races, with race, with ethnic background. To call this discriminatory in the pursuit of meritocracy is essentially to fly in the face of the facts.